Hi everyone, my name is Colleen. I read The Red Kayak, and it is about a little boy that has a lot of problems dealing with death and different social situations amongst his friends. But it starts off by three little boys waiting for um, Brady's cousin Carl, who's a paramedic that takes him to school all the time in his ambulance. And there's a family that built a mansion on um, Digger's house, and JT is their other friend. Um, there's a family that built a mansion on Digger's grandfather's land and ended up causing Digger's grandfather to live in a nursing home. And while they were waiting for Carl to come pick them up in the ambulance, they saw a red kayak go by on the river by their house. They live in the country. And this red kayak belonged to the D'Angelos who built the mansion. Well, it was a gloomy day and it was raining and the currents were really heavy. And normally when Brady would see something like that, because him and his dad do crabbing and a lot of fishing off the river and own a boat, that once you see someone in dangerous situation like that or dangerous weather, they would call a rescue team and let them know to warn them that someone was on the river. Well, Digger didn't like this family because they took his grandfather's land. So he was kind of peer pressuring, or I guess you could say, like, telling Brady was okay and that who cares about those people anyway, blah, 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 because he didn't care about them, but Brady was really worried and that ended up not saying anything. Well, when Carl had dropped him off that morning, he's like, Carl, I saw someone in a red kayak. The D'Angelos were on the red kayak, like on the river. I didn't say anything. I probably should have and was really worried. Well, Carl said, hey, if they're out there on the river, they probably know what they're doing. I'm sure everything will be fine. So Brady tried to forget about it, but all morning was thinking about it, and then kind of got distracted with school and his exams that he had that day. All these boys are in eighth grade, so they see each other all the time during the days. They have classes together sometimes. Well, Brady was in Spanish class, and all of a sudden got called down to the principal's office. And he walks over and goes to the teacher, like, why? And the teacher had no idea why. Well, when Brady got to the principal's office, his dad was there and said, hey, Brady, there has been an accident on the river today with the red kayak. Carl told me about this morning. We really need your help. You know the river as well as any of us do, and we really need your help looking for them. So Brady went out on his boat while his dad went out on their boat and rescued people, and the police were there, and Carl was there with the ambulance offshore to be there in case they found someone. Well, Brady's dad and the rescue people went a different way than Brady did, and they found um, Brady got a call from his dad saying that they had found Mrs. D'Angelo and that she was okay, but she was going straight to the hospital because it was like 40 degrees outside. The water was really cold, and she had been in the water for a long time. Well, Brady thought about going or turned around and went to go where his dad had found Mrs. D'Angelo, but while he was doing that, he was going in every little cove he saw, and finally saw a yellow life vest, and he saw Ben. Ben is 3 years old, and Brady had babysat Ben when the D'Angelos had first moved in for a little bit. So he kind of had a connection with Ben, and Brady's little sister died when she was 5 months old, and his mom moved away for a really long time to cope with all the stress and the depression she had from losing a baby at such a young age. And him and his dad had lived together for a really long time until his mom moved back. So they went through the distress of losing a young child, and he wasn't able to go to his sister's funeral because his parents didn't want him to because he was younger. Well, when all this was going through his mind when Ben was missing. So when Brady found Ben, he had done CPR classes with Carl, his cousin that's a paramedic, and he remembered all the steps to CPR. So he started doing that and checking to make sure to see if Ben was breathing or not. And Ben's body was so cold because he was half in the water and half not. Well, Brady had resuscitated him back to life with the CPR and kept doing that while he was trying to drive the boat to shore at the same time. Once he reached shore, the rescue team and Carl had helped Ben off the boat and kept the CPR going. And when they drove off, Carl screamed, "Hey, I got a pulse! I got a pulse!" Well, Mrs. D'Angelo was fine, ended up being in critical conditions, but she ended up being fine. And Ben had gotten airlifted to another hospital that specialized in what he was going through. So everyone was so happy. They were like so proud of Brady for being such a hero and being so brave and saving Ben's life. His parents were proud of him. They went such through such a hard thing. His parents were like, "You can stay home. You've been through a lot today. You don't have to go to school tomorrow." Well, there were interviewers calling, newspapers were calling, his friends were calling, other people were calling, and he decided to give a couple of interviews, and a newspaper article went out. The next day at school, he went to school, and everyone was congratulating him, telling him how much of a hero he was, all this fuss about how much of a hero he was. And then the next day after school, or the next day at school, his um his friends weren't really talking to him. JT and Digger were ignoring him at school, and they weren't calling him after school to play. JT, Digger, and Brady did tons of things together. They went fishing together, they went crabbing together, they went to boathouses, they went swimming on the river, they would have sleepovers and play video games. They had some classes together, some of the classes they didn't have together, and um, so it was weird that they weren't talking to him at school. Well, then he was supposed to do an interview at school about this, and his parents agreed to it in the school, and so did Brady. Well, it ended up halfway through school, his mom came to school and was like, "I need to talk to Brady," and he was like, "Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Well, it ended up that Ben got pneumonia because he aspirated in the water and got sick and died. And Brady was so upset. He didn't know what to do. He thought everything was his fault because he could have called the rescue team that one morning and had them check the river for the kayak, and he kept replaying that morning in his head all the time. Well, his mom didn't know what to do because she had gone through the distress of losing a daughter about 7 years ago, but she didn't. Him and her and his dad like didn't really know how to comfort Brady. So Carl tried to comfort Brady and tried to tell him that it wasn't his fault. Um, well, one day he found out that Mr. D'Angelo wasn't living with Mrs. D'Angelo anymore, and that Mrs. D'Angelo was living by herself. And Brady was like, she can't be living by herself at this time. This is such a sad time. She needs to be with someone. So Brady had this really good idea, like let's cook her something and go over there and see if um, he could help them in any way or help her in any way. So him and his mom went and they knocked on the door and Mrs. D'Angelo didn't answer, but they left a phone number and email address. A couple of days later, Mrs. D'Angelo responded and said, "I'm really sorry. Like this has been a really tough time. I wanted to thank you so much for saving Ben. I don't want you to think any of this is your fault. And yes, I would love any of the help that you want to give me." So the next day, Brady went over there again, and Brady went over there again, and they went through stuff that he could do, cutting the grass, planting flowers, cleaning the boathouse, doing a bunch of stuff because Mrs. D'Angelo wasn't doing that good and she was living by herself because Mr. D'Angelo left like Brady's mom left when his sister died because he couldn't handle it and was blaming Mrs. D'Angelo for taking Ben in the kayaks on such a horrible day and why would she do that because the weather was so bad. So Brady spent a lot of his time there and noticed that Mrs. D'Angelo was really getting sick and mentioned something to his mom. Well, his mom thought that maybe she was pregnant from being having morning sickness and it was a side effect. And Brady really didn't know what to look for. Um, and Brady's mom had built a butterfly garden in honor of his sister dying, and it kind of helped her cope with the stress of losing a daughter, and it always reminded her. But they didn't have any pictures of his sister out, but it was a remembrance of his sister. So Brady thought it would be a good idea if his mom came over and gave that idea to Mrs. D'Angelo to make of her own for Ben. and she thought it was a great idea, and they talked, and it ended up that Mrs. D'Angelo was pregnant, and she started getting better over time. She was really depressed in the beginning, and then started getting happier and would eat lunch with Brady. And in the beginning, she would just leave a list of things for Brady to do around the house while she was upstairs sleeping. Um, and over Memorial Day weekend, Mrs. D'Angelo had told Brady that she was leaving for the weekend to go see Mr. D'Angelo in Virginia, where he had an apartment, and that they were going to talk about how she was pregnant and that what they were going to do with the baby. And Brady was so excited that she was pregnant and that she was going to have another baby, that they deserved it because they had lost Ben. But he said that he would continue to work just to tell him what he needed to do over the weekend. Well, Mrs. D'Angelo showed Brady the boathouse and wanted him to clean out the boathouse and organize it and get rid of the trash, rake the leaves. Well, she had left and said goodbye, and he went down to the boathouse to clean it out. Now, at this point in time in the book, Brady still hadn't talked to Digger or JT, and they went all spring break without talking. JT had lied and said he was going on vacation when he didn't. Like, it was really known that JT and Digger were avoiding Brady at all costs. And Brady had no idea why, but thought that maybe they had felt bad about it too because they didn't help Mrs. D'Angelo and Ben the morning that everything happened and when Ben died. They hadn't even talked in school when they saw each other, and his mom was getting really worried about how he wasn't hanging out with his friends. Well, the day that Brady was cleaning out the boathouse, um, I'm sorry, I forgot a part. Mr. or Brady's dad had yelled at Brady previously a couple days before and was like, why did you boys take my drill and use it and not put it back? I need it. It's missing. I know you took it. It kind of blamed Brady on it, and they didn't have very much money, and the crabbing wasn't going so well. So, um, his dad really was upset and kind of stressed out. And Brady's like, I didn't take it. I swear we didn't take it. I didn't use it for anything. And Brady's dad kind of just shook his head and walked away. Well, now I'm backtracking. So now he's cleaning the boathouse again, and he's raking and goes over this really hard thing, and it ends up being a drill and has red paint on it, the same red paint that was on the kayak. And Brady was like, oh my gosh, that's why Digger and JT haven't been talking to me. Well, um, the the book went back a couple scenes and talked about before in the beginning when the D'Angelos had first moved in, how Brady had the idea of taking his dad's drill and drilling holes in the green canoe that they had, so that they could play like a funny joke on him. And when Mr. D'Angelo would get in the green canoe, instead of halfway through his canoe ride, he would be sinking and have to go swimming back because his canoe would be broken. Well, Brady thought, oh my gosh, like Digger thought about how much hated Mr. D'Angelo and his family for taking over his grandfather's land, and went straight to JT because he didn't want to go to Digger because he wanted to confront JT first. Well, it ended up being that JT knew that Digger had put holes in the red kayak, and that's why the kayak sunk. And Brady went out to the river and found the kayak on the bottom of the river. And then JT's like, don't say anything, don't say anything. I don't want to get in trouble. Please don't say anything. And at this time, JT was going through a lot too because his dad needed a new kidney and was in the hospital. And his he had to take over his dad's chicken farm while his dad was in the hospital. So Brady kind of felt bad bringing this up, but he needed to get to the bottom of this because he couldn't live with himself. He finally had gotten over it, and then he found this drill and didn't know what to do, whether he should be turning it into the police or if he should be getting rid of it. Well, then he went to Digger. He was furious, wrapped the drill in plastic bags, and rode his bike to Digger's house and confronted Digger. And Digger pretended like he hadn't done anything, and there was nothing wrong, and that he didn't know what Brady was talking about. And then Brady had gone home but remembered that he forgot to close the garage at the D'Angelo's. So we rode back to the D'Angelo's and he heard someone in the back by the boathouse and went there and Brady or Digger was trying to look for the drill and was like, Brady, tell me where it is. We need to get rid of that. The police don't need to know about it. Give it to me right now. And um, Brady's like, I'm not giving it to you. It's gone. Like it's hidden somewhere. Like I'm not giving it to you. And Digger was like, you threatening at him. If you turn it in, our lives are going to be over. It was your idea. That's the reason why I did it. And confessed that he had done it and that JT was like the lookout and helped him. And then Brady didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should be turning in the drill or if he should be getting rid of the drill. It was he kind of had to choose between what was right and um, what like how if he could keep his friends during the situation. So it killed him like inside. He went through final exams like this. He kept working for Mrs. D'Angelo, and finally Mr. D'Angelo had come back and was kind of keeping a really close eye on Brady because he didn't quite trust him very well. But towards the end of summer, Mrs. D'Angelo had come up with a new list of stuff for Brady to do, and Brady was like, I'm really sorry I can't work for you because he had felt so guilty about this drill. Well, he made an excuse that he had final exams and that the week after that he was really going to Rhode Island to visit his cousins, but that gave him some time to think about what he wanted to do. And he had like I said before, like his parents weren't really close enough and comforting enough to be helping him with situations like this and talking to him about this because I think after his sister had died, they kind of separated and like never talked about his sister, never talked about what happened. They never visited her grave and stuff like that. It was just like something they weren't very emotionally connected. And so he went to Rhode Island, took the train, had some time to think about it, spent a lot of time with his cousins, and when he was at his aunt's house, he saw a picture of his sister Amanda when she was a baby. And Brady had never seen a picture of Amanda since his mom got rid of everything and put him in the attic and locked it up so that they not wouldn't forget about him, but it was really or her, but it was really hard for them to see pictures of her. So his aunt noticed that he was crying looking at the picture and asked Brady if he wanted to keep it. And Brady was like, "Yeah, I've never seen my sister before. Thank you so much." Well, on the way back on the train, Brady had a lot to think about. When he got home, he was really happy to be home with his parents, but it was still killing him inside that he didn't know what to do about the drill situation. So one day, he went crabbing with his dad and said like, and they got back and he had asked his dad if he could help him with something, and his dad said, well, I don't know, like, is it illegal or is it legal? And Brady was like, no, it's legal. I just need your help with it. Well, it ended up being that Brady um, had figured out what he wanted to do and wanted to do the right thing, whether it meant he was going to lose his friends over it or not, because he couldn't deal with the guilt. And he knew, even if it hurt everyone around him and got himself in trouble, that he was doing the right thing. So he asked his dad if he could get the boat, and that they could drag the kayak out of the water because he knew where it had been. His dad asked him why he didn't tell anybody that he had found the kayak, and he said, I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't think it was the right time, but now I really want to get the kayak. Well, him and his dad went out there and finally found the kayak after some time. They found a grill, they found a bunch of other stuff, but they ended up finding the kayak. And it was raining that day, so all like the mud and the gunk underneath in the river was all over the kayak when they took it out. But when the rain started coming down, it like washed the kayak clean, where you could see the three drill holes from the drill. His dad looked at Brady, and Brady looked up his dad and told him the entire story about how it was his idea, but he wasn't involved in it, and that Digger did it because he hates the D'Angelos for taking over his grandfather's land, and that he didn't know what to do. And Brady's dad said, we need to go to the police. And Brady's like, well, I don't want to get myself in trouble. I don't want to get my friends in trouble. So they talked to Carl, talked to his mom, and Carl said, you need to get a lawyer before you do anything. They explained it to the lawyer, everything that happened, and then the lawyer was like, well, you're not going to get in trouble. It was just your idea, but you didn't do anything, and kind of told them everything that was going to go on, that there was going to be a trial, and that his friends might get in trouble, and they're probably going to end up going to juvenile for until they're 21 and get sentenced with second degree murder or manslaughter. The lawyer was kind of just going over everything and kind of telling him that he was doing the right thing, even though he really didn't think he was. Um, so they had a bunch of trials and all that, and this Digger and JT still hadn't talked to Brady since then, and now they were like seeing each other in court and all that, and Brady never got in trouble, and finally, um, Digger and JT had confessed to doing this, that drilling the kayak and having it buried, and that was their fault that Ben had died. But then Digger, in his confession, said that it was all his idea and that JT was just a lookout so that JT shouldn't get in trouble. Well, it was a judge, not a trial, because they're juvenile or their younger kids are in eighth grade. So they both ended up getting in trouble because they were involved. Whether the JT was really the one who did it or was the lookout, he knew about it, never said anything. And they got sentenced to 9 months in juvenile, and they would look to see how they were acting, and if they were okay, they would be able to come out. Well, um, they also said they were sorry, and that they were happy that Brady had done the right thing, even though this meant that they were getting in trouble, and that they didn't weren't mad at Brady, and really like the whole situation ended up being kind of crazy, but a lot of the stuff was on the news and the newspapers, and Brady kind of was just protecting himself from all of that as well. And after all the trials and all that came, he had gone home one day and saw that there was a for sale sign up at the D'Angelo's, and um, that they had moved and left, and Brady had ridden his bike over there and ran into the person that was selling the house for them, and asked if the butterfly garden was in the back that he had built with Mrs. D'Angelo and his mom. And the realtor said, yeah, why are you asking me that? She took the whole thing. And Brady had a really big smile on his face and knew that they moved away to be in a better place because they couldn't handle all the stress of re-going what had happened to Ben. Um, and then Brady ended up living his life the right way because he knew he'd done the right thing, and his friends weren't sentenced to jail till they were 21. I can't stop the movie. Stop. You're ruining my movie. Stop. Bye. Um, and um, that's how the book ended. There, his friends got um, sentenced to 9 months, and they weren't going to be in jail until they were 21. To go over the things that we were supposed to go over, like there wasn't really any physical development. The social emotional development was whether I mean this really like stressed Brady out with his friendship. Like he didn't know if he was supposed to be going to the police or if to get his friends in trouble. Like he was choosing between what was right and um whether or not he wanted to get his friends in trouble. Like, was he going to lose his friends? He didn't want to lose his friends, but he couldn't live with the guilt of not doing something right. And the moral development is whether or not you're going to be you're whether or not you're going to lose friends over it or it's going to upset people, doing the right thing is always the best choice. So if you broke the law or someone's in trouble and it's really serious and it means losing a friendship over something, knowing that you did the right thing, you should always be doing the right thing, especially if it's illegal. There was there was also a lot of like for the social emotional, like he had to go through losing a sister when his sister was 5 months, and then losing a little boy that lived next door that he had babysat. It was really stressful on both families, on the D'Angelos and Brady and his family. There was a lot of stressors in school, like this. it was an eighth grader. He resuscitated a child back to life, and then the child died, and he thought it was his entire fault because he of one choice he made. So there was definitely a lot of decisions that Brady had to go to, choosing friends, choosing between what was right. Um, he had to do CPR on a kid when he was in eighth grade. He went from being a hero to thinking that he was the reason that Ben died. And he went through trial and saw his friends go to jail. And he just went through a lot of stress during school. And knowing that he didn't have his two best friends by his side after that when he started high school was a really social impact on his life. And he really had to think about every decision he made. Um, while I was reading the book, I thought it was so sad. I thought it was sad that a 3-year-old died. I thought it was sad that going through that stress, I couldn't imagine being in eighth grade going through all that stress. And um, having to turn in my friends, I'd never been in a situation like that. I don't know how I would have handled it. And he kind of grew a lot closer. Brady grew a lot closer to his family after all of this has happened. But knowing that you always have your family there is also a good thing. He didn't really have his family at first, and I don't know how I would feel if I was in his situation and wasn't able to talk to my family or even talk to my best friends because they were the ones that were involved in somewhat killing Ben. Um, I don't know, it was really emotional for me to read, and I can't even imagine an eighth grader going through all of that. It was a great book. I enjoyed reading it. I learned a lot. I think sixth to eighth graders who are reading this would learn a lot and kind of really understand why choosing the right way is a good thing and knowing that it could be a hard decision, but that it's always the correct decision to be doing the right thing, whether it makes you look uncool or you think you'll get yourself in trouble or you think you'll get your friends in trouble. You should always go with your gut instinct and do the right thing. Yeah, that's it.